All right, let's get to quarterbacks.
What about him?
In a world where Aaron Rodgers is available, okay, let's play in that hypothetical. What do you think is the ideal outcome at quarterback from the Jets' perspective?
They want Aaron Rodgers. Like if he's available, like he's their top target. I think that's why you haven't heard about them giving an offer to Derek Carr yet, because everybody
they're waiting out the darkness.
Yeah, as is he has the whole league by the balls right now, as he always does.
Just like he likes it.
Just like he likes it. And so I think Derek Carr is probably honestly waiting to see what happens there, because if the Jets don't get Aaron Rodgers, I think it probably helps Carr in negotiations, because then the Jets are like, okay, we really need you
if Derek Carr goes to the Jets, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, it's big time stuff for Derek Carr.
So yeah,
I would love to be in one of those fucking meetings where you sit in like the big, beautiful conference room with a huge wood table, and they put the video up there, and there's some crazy hype video, and I'm sure it's him, with a gold jacket or something like that. Just what that sell looks like when you're even a moderately good quarterback in free agency. That was the whole thing about Derek Carr when this was all happening. I remember tweeting in December that it really does feel like he's going to get released, because I don't think the Raiders have any leverage in this situation.
No.
He has a no-trade clause. The timing of when the guarantees kick in, it really does feel like he's going to be released. And so many people were like, absolutely not. Like, they're going to trade him. It's like, okay, that sounds
Just
good.
wait. Yeah.
And the other part was quarterbacks of Derek Carr's caliber, whatever caliber you think that are, don't typically hit free agency.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen very often. Carson Wentz got traded for multiple draft picks last offseason. Yep. So when you are that sort of quarterback, even if you're the 12th best quarterback in the league, when you hit the market, there is a robust market for your services.
I mean, think about all the stuff, all the hubbub around Daniel Jones right now that he's asking for $45 million. Like, Derek Carr's accomplished a whole lot more than Daniel Jones has. Like, I don't know what people's opinions are of those two compared to each other, but they're around the same level if you're ranking the quarterbacks, probably. So
I think that Derek Carr has definitely accomplished more than Daniel Jones has.
For sure. So yeah, I am fascinated to see what the contract looks like too, because I think he was set to make something like $30 to $35 million. Yep. I imagine he's looking for that as a baseline for his next gig.
So with that in mind, we had Dan Dugan on yesterday talk about the Daniel Jones situation. We're talking to Colton about Jared Goff and kind of that archetype of quarterback, that guy who is the 12th to 16th best quarterback in the league who makes $30 to $40 million a year. It typically isn't what you're after. Mm-hmm. That's not, if you could build it in an ideal world, that's not the type of guy you would chase, just because it's difficult. Yep. The pathways to contention with that sort of quarterback are narrower than they are with either having a top 5 quarterback or having a guy on a really cheap deal. But not every team is operating from the same position. Yeah. And I think the Jets are one of those rare teams when you're looking at the entire chessboard and what it looks like and what last season was like, the urgency that Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are probably looking at. They're the sort of team where I can understand looking at the entire landscape of the position and saying, this is worth it. Like, with the right quarterback, with the way that our defense is built, with some of the young talent that we have, we can be a playoff team. And even if you wouldn't do it this way in an ideal set of circumstances, for us, this does make sense.
And it should be said, a part of the reason it does make so much sense for them is they failed so miserably to find the guy in the draft.
Yes. That has to happen first.
Yeah, you draft a guy second overall, and he has to be the most colossal bust maybe that we've seen in like a decade at the position for them to be in this position where they're convincing themselves like we have to pay Derek Carr $40 million a year. Whereas, when you drafted Zach Wilson 2 years ago, you didn't think you were going to be in this position, obviously. So it's something their jobs are on the line here. They need to get this right.
Do you think that's true? Do you think that this is a playoffs or bust sort of situation?
They'll say that Woody, Woody Johnson did not give them a playoff mandate, but I don't think anybody in the building believes that. I think they know, especially with how close they were last year, how they're pitching it that they're a quarterback away. They have this great defense. They're going to try and build the offensive line back up. I do think if we get at the end of the season, maybe I don't know, maybe that's it's not as simple as playoff for us. Maybe if they get 9 wins and they just miss, they'd be okay, or they get 10 wins and they just miss, they'd be okay with that. But you need to have a better year than you did last year.
Do you have a sense of what the price tag for Rodgers would look like trade wise?
Yeah, it's hard to get a read on that. It's such an interesting thing because the Packers kind of have leverage, but also don't But quarterbacks, if you look like Carson Wentz, as you just mentioned, he got a decent value for a guy that nobody in the league wanted. So
he was traded for a first-round pick 2 years ago.
Yeah,
more.
So I think I've been saying I think it's at least one first-round pick and probably if not another first-round pick, other high draft picks or young players. I think it's going to take way more than people maybe realize.
So looking at their cap right now, I'm wondering how you think they free up a little bit of wiggle room. They're essentially at the cap. Yeah. They've got some expensive deals on the books.
That's what I'm saying. And the quarterback thing, like you do that when you have a guy in a rookie deal, and now all of a sudden they don't have the quarterback and they don't have the money either.
And it's a great point because the way that they've built this thing, those free agent bills come due eventually when you build a lot of your team through free agency. $72 million combined right now. C.J. Mosley, DJ Reed, Laken Tomlinson, C.J. Uzomah, Jordan Whitehead. 5 guys, $72 million. That's a lot. Yeah. That is a lot of money.
None of those guys are stars either.
Yes, but that's what you have to do when you're building your team that way. Yeah. So how do you feel like they free up enough wiggle room for a quarterback or just to create enough flexibility, period, to build this thing this offseason?
So Mosley's a fascinating one because he has like a $21 million cap hit for the next 2 years, which obviously they can't carry that in. He's a solid linebacker, but not a guy you can pay like that. So they either have to convince him to take a pay cut, do a restructure where you're just pushing more money down the road, or they have to get rid of him, and he's like a leader of the team, so that's hard.
It's a tough one.
I think they cut Corey Davis. They'll save like $12 million from that. Carl Lawson's the one I'm fascinated by because his contract was structured in a way they can get out of it now and save $15 million and no dead cap. But he's also like a solid defensive end at a premium position. He's not old. So that they have some tough decisions they have to make, and that's kind of the problem you run into when you are spending all this money on guys and you don't have the quarterback. You have to get rid of good players, and I think fans, I hear the thing where everybody's like the salary cap's not real, and it kind of makes me mad sometimes because if it wasn't real, you wouldn't have to cut all these guys in order to save money. Like so,
or restructure all these guys and push the money down.
And the Saints are like paying the price now for all the times they pushed it down the road, and they were really bad last year because they couldn't build their roster. So they're in a really interesting spot, and I think Derek Carr is very appealing in a lot of ways to them because you can get him now, and then you can figure everything else out because the earliness of Carr is very unique too. On top of like him being available at all, the fact you can sign him in the next week or two. It lets you like set the table for what you need to do the rest of the offseason, which I think is appealing to them.
And I also think that because you can structure that contract however you want. With Rodgers, right, you're locked into a certain number. The Rodgers thing, though, I believe if they trade for him, it's only $16 million against the cap this year.
You have to pay him like $60 million in cash up front, but it becomes a small cap hit this year. There's also the risk with Rodgers, which we didn't mention, that you don't know. Like, are you getting guarantees playing beyond this year? And you're trading all this stuff for him?
I think you'd have to, right? I think you'd have to have some assurances before making the trade that he was going to do that. But he can change his mind. Yes.
He's Aaron Rodgers.
He's going to change his mind week to week, it feels like. But with Carr even, let's say, this is all funny money. And that's why this idea of AAV as a way to kind of talk about these guys feels silly to me sometimes, for the same reason that Derek Carr getting a $40 million a year extension last year felt silly. If you can tell a guy, we're going to pay you $40 million a year, but year 3 of a 3-year deal is a $58 million cap hit, and only the first 2 years are guaranteed. Like, you can play with it. And I think that's kind of the benefit of being able to shape the contract however you want. If you want to sign Derek Carr to a 3-year deal, and year 1 the cap hit is $18 million, and you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, that's potentially on the table. Man, they put up everything else is set up so well. If the quarterback takes a step, like, what can this team be? And when you remove that piece of the puzzle, this is what you're left with. Like, it almost doesn't matter to a certain extent all of the things you do right when that goes wrong. And you're left to pick up the pieces, and that's exactly where the Jets are right now.
It's funny. I was talking to somebody earlier on NFL Network, like late last night at the bar. I saw the Jets-Browns game was on TV from week 2. And I was I don't know, it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny to me. But I was talking to somebody in line today about it, and they were saying how, like, they're talking on the broadcast about, they just need Joe Flacco to hold down the fort until Zach Wilson gets back, and then they'll be ready to go. And they were winning games with Zach, and he just wasn't the reason. So it's just perfect Jets that they finally have like a legit good roster. Like that wasn't like a fluke. I think they had a legit roster last year. They had this great young core of talent, and they just didn't have the quarterback still. Like they haven't had a good quarterback in a very long time. They had the one good Fitzpatrick season. Other than that, it's been a long time.
You're talking to me right now. It's a life I'm very familiar with.
Hey, if Justin Fields is the Jets quarterback this last year, they're in the playoffs. So
it's a very good point. It can always be worse. I guess is the lesson to be learned from this conversation.